press the right button. Right, good morning everybody. Good morning, I'm Mike Introna and I am the chairman of the committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to this meeting of the Children and Families Select Committee that is being broadcast live and recorded for publication. So thank you. Firstly, I'd like to ask the committee to approve the minutes of the last meeting. And if you've all read your minutes, we'll take a vote on that. Can we just agree? Yeah, fine, thank you. Do you want me to sign those now, James, or we'll do them at the end? Okay, so number two, apologies for absence. So can I ask if there are any apologies, please?
We have received apologies from Councillor Debbie Darby for other reasons and has not sent a substitute. We've also had apologies from Councillor Michelle Welsh for other reasons and has been substituted by Councillor Jim Creamer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Jim, welcome once again. Declarations of interest. If any councillor or officer has an interest in any matter on the agenda, you should declare it now. Please raise your hand now if you have an interest to declare. If you have an interest to declare, you should state what type of interest it is and give brief details. Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. Me and my wife are going down the fostering route and we're working with a third party company. So obviously any conversations to do with funding in that regards would be a pecuniary interest.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lee.
Chairman.
Councillor quickly.
Relation to the SEND report, I am a member of the Diverse Academies Trust and we operate a number of special schools, including the new one at Ravensdale.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Quigley. So we will move into the agenda items, and we've got quite a lot on the agenda, as seems to be the norm for us at Children and Families. So agenda item number 4, and I'd like to invite Colin Pettigrew, Corporate Director for Children and Families, to introduce the report, please. Colin.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. And if I could start off with a number of officer apologies from partnership agencies. So the Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children Partnership is a statutory partnership that has representation from the police, from health and from the local authority, and also has an independent scrutineer. And those things are established in statutory guidance. Unfortunately, so I sit on the senior leadership group of that executive for the partnership, together with the Assistant Chief Constable Rob Griffin, the Chief Nurse Rosa Waddingham, that this committee is familiar with, and the independent scrutineer is Dr. Mark Pupil. All three of those, unfortunately, are on leave and out of the country. Rosa Waddingham, Chief Nurse, is just arriving back from her annual leave of last week, and both Assistant Chief Constable Griffin and Dr. Mark Peel are both on annual leave and out of the country today. They wished me to pass on their profuse apologies to the committee. Other circumstances they would have been here. So the report for 23-24 sets out our progress against the work programme that this committee agreed when it received the report for 22-23, for the 23-24, and sets out the progress that we've made against that. I'm joined in the meeting, however, by our head of service for that area, and the business manager Sultai Yusuf and Sam Harris, who are able to will be able to assist me in any questions of more detail than I'm able to assist the committee.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you for the apologies, and thank you for what is a comprehensive report. I'd like to ask Councillor Tracy Taylor, do you have anything that you'd like to add, please?
Not at this point, Chair. I think it's better to field questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So at this point, I'd like to move the recommendations that are on page 17, and I seek a seconder, please. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm now going to open this to the floor for debate. So if we've got any questions. Councillor Callaghan.
Thank you. And we thank you for this report, as it's comprehensive, and in the main it's quite positive. We note there has been progress with the safeguarding partnership. However, there still appears to be challenges going forward. So one of my questions are, what have been the key challenges over the last year for the NSCP in delivering on its objectives? How have these challenges been overcome? Which, if any, challenges remain? And the second question is, what has been the impact of training and development activity across the partnership in supporting the delivery of the NSCP's objectives? Thank you.
Thank you. So who's going to take that?
Chair, if I may start, and just to give a heads up to Ty and Sam, I will come to those colleagues, with regards to the third agenda item. Actually, got Amanda in present as well, with regards to the effects of training and development. The key challenges across the partnership, and it is a complex system, will include the supply of workforce. And that's you'll see in a report further down the agenda item that we identified that as a key risk, for children's services within the organisation. That's also true, I think, across the partner agencies. One of the other key challenges, of course, is again, and it's covered in the subsequent report, on agenda item, is sufficiency of placements, where we need to reach a decision, that unfortunately a child has to leave their family. The provision of that provision can be very challenging, as it is up and down the country. We've got some plans and strategies to address that, but it's a bit of a lag. I think one of the things I would want to, and I should have said by way of introduction, this is the performance report for 23-24, so it finishes on the 31st of March. And there's whilst there is a view from the partnership of how well we're doing and what progress we're making, that's also got a level of independent scrutiny from Dr. Mark Peel. And then we had the benefit a few weeks after the end of March of being visited by Ofsted, where Ofsted did their inspection of local authorities' children's services, including health and protection. That was an extremely positive outcome that happened in May, reported a couple of in June, that found us to be good, in terms of Ofsted's judgments around help and protection for children. Some very positive things to read there, and indeed you could see the impact of some of the things that we'd identified as priority. So, for instance, helping families earlier through earlier help and prevention. Therefore, not having the need to work with families in a child protection planning way, but in an early help children in need way. We've seen a decrease in child protection plans and an increase in families that are worked with in children in need. We've also sustained the number of looked after children that we've had probably for the last 3 or 4 years, around 950. And in fact, if you take out the increased number of children who become looked after because they're unaccountable asylum-seeking children, Nottinghamshire has seen a slight reduction, in the number of looked after children, where a number of local areas up and down the country have seen a marked increase. We would suggest that that's around being able to support families earlier with levels of help, and of course the ongoing commitment by this council during a range of administrations to continue to support things like youth service, early help, children's centres, family hubs. In terms of the impact on training and development, who's best placed? Sam.
Hello, Sam Harris. I'm the Service Manager for the Nottinghamshire Safeguarding Children Partnership. So if I could bring your attention to page 31 and 32 of the report, where you'll see the summary from the Multi-Agency Training Guidance and Procedures Group. And in terms of the impact of across the partnership, so I think the first thing to point out is that we've been able to increase the offer. We are competing very strongly nationally, actually, with other partnerships in terms of the amount that we're able to offer. So over the reporting period in question, we provided 60 events, a combination of face-to-face and e-learning, which was an increase of 6 on the previous year. We had 7,100 e-learning courses completed and 3,032 face-to-face completed. So again, compared to other partnerships nationally, that's a very strong attendance level and a very strong offer. But I think the other thing to point out is that we have a really strong learning loop between our review group, so the group that does the statutory reviews and develops the learning about what we want to do better, and the learning and workforce development group, which entrench that into the training. And so what you can see is things like the development of the When We Are Scared, an introduction to trauma training, the anti-racist practice training, professional curiosity training, and indeed the content that we provide in Safeguarding Children Today, which is our 4 times a year sort of seminar-based offer that summarises what's happening locally and nationally and the learning from our reviews. You can see that the strong attendance continuing on those things shows that partners are very kind of wanting to be in that training. And what you'll also see is that we do before partners can get their certificate, we ask them to provide feedback, and then 3 months later we send out asking them to tell us whether it's improved their practice. And of the high level of returns received, 95.5% said that it had. So I think what we can demonstrate is we've got a good learning loop in terms of what we put into the training, but also a good feedback loop in terms of the quality of the training and the impact it has on practice.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Thanks for that. Councillor Callahan. Anything else?
No, that's fine, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Creamer.
Thank you, Chair. It's just on the neglect strategy, page 25 at the bottom paragraph. The toolkit, it failed a little. Why did the toolkit not identify effective use of the toolkit across the system? When do we expect this concern to be addressed? And within the same paragraph, just for confirmation, there's a cross-partnership meeting was supposed to take place in August. Am I reading that has taken place this August, or is that for next August? Because it's a report. So, just for clarification, and if it did take place, what was the exact outcomes?
I'll come back with the August one and give a heads up to either Amanda, or Sam again, with regards to the specific thing. August, remember this report is for 23-24. Yeah, it's here today. We'd rather it was here in a more timely way, but it's subject to the pattern of our meetings. Yeah, so that is of course August 2024. So some of the grammar within the report suggests future dates when actually the dates that will have happened, if you like. Grammar's not the right phrase, but I think you get my gist. If we could pass on to Sam Harris with regards to specifically what we've done with that.
So in terms of the August, you're correct, and I apologise about the grammar there. It is at a cross partnership, so that's with the city and the county together meeting in 2 weeks' time, where we have a paper that's being considered in terms of developing a cross partnership action plan, and that's then being looked at by the joint strategic leadership group. So again, city and county together, a further 2 weeks after that for it to be endorsed and then put into action. I think the thing to say is also, since we wrote the annual report, there has been an Ofsted inspection in which inspectors found some really good examples of use of the neglect toolkit, and so we can show sort of an improvement over that period of time, but certainly more work to do.
Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just thanks for that. Just wondering when the information will finally come back, because it's, as I say, it's a new system, newish system anyway. It's found a failure. Hopefully there'll be no more failures in the future, but it'd be nice to have a report back that everything's working smooth when it is working smooth. And if it's not working smooth, the report back.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Creamer.
If I may, Chair, I think I do have to say, as Corporate Executive Director for Children's Services, I'm not sure if the report found failure. It certainly found areas that we could be working better and improve. If I may, And it's partly an answer to Councillor Callaghan's earlier question. To refer committee to the Ofsted, the external regulation of a team of 9 inspectors who spent 3 weeks with us, who found the highly visible and effective leadership team has significantly influenced change to improve the experiences of progressing children in Nottinghamshire. Leaders are child focused and very effective, inspired others in the council, the partnership, the Safeguarding Partnership, and the wider community to change the lives of children and families. The strong learning culture is highly evident in Nottinghamshire. Leaders have developed a comprehensive range of structures that drive learning and improvement. Front Door Change Programme has significantly transformed the Maltesian Safeguarding Hub. Significant investment in workforce development has enabled leaders and managers to create an environment where social work can thrive. The cultural shift within children's services is well embedded in the workforce. There is relentless focus by leaders on staff recruitment and retention. The local authorities secured DFE employer support funding. Social workers have manageable caseloads so they can support children and families effectively. Learning and development opportunities are available to staff, as well as career progression pathways. Staff from Black and Global Majority backgrounds are well supported to access the Black and Asian Leadership Initiative programme. This was a really positive report that found that leadership and management, including the political leadership, that all members on this committee should take credit for, given your scrutiny and challenge of cabinet members, was found to be outstanding, by Ofsted. They don't give those gongs away, lightly, I have to say, and I think that the committee should take credit for, the scrutiny, and support and challenge, that you offer myself as the statutory director, and in this particularly this part of the world, the cabinet member for children as lead member for children.
And thank you, Colin. I'm not sure that I could have said that remotely as eloquently as that. I think it's important to recognise that we're here today as a scrutiny committee. Councillor Creamer, you seem to be a permanent substitution, so, and I welcome that, because you have a good degree of knowledge and you're not afraid to speak your mind. But we're not here really to discuss what happened 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, and keep going on about that. All we can do is look to improve from where we are now, and I think it's pretty clear that things are improving. We've had a poor report a couple of years ago, but the reports more recently have been pretty excellent, with some really excellent feedback. So, and I think our job as a scrutiny committee is to be apolitical. I think that we've demonstrated that on a number of occasions, hopefully since I've been chairman, and we'll continue doing that. So thank you. Is there any feedback?
Yeah, if I can just say, I agree with that, but the thing is as well that constant scrutiny, constant challenge, meaningful scrutiny, meaningful challenge is always useful to act and make sure that improvement does continue. So it's nothing malicious or political, etc., etc. It's just that it's our role to make sure that everything's running smoothly, and if we don't understand something, ask the silly questions. Apart from that, totally
agree with that 100%. We're here to challenge, but challenge constructively. Councillor Taylor, would you like to make an additional point?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's also important to note that what we're receiving today is the annual report of the partnership, April 23 to March 24. It isn't a set of KPIs, and we're just on the latest quarterly update. It is a fixed point in time document. It was crafted by and on behalf of the partnership, so not just by the council. So it is a document which belongs to the partnership and pertains to a period of time. So whilst I acknowledge it's slightly awkward that we're referring to past dates as if they were future dates, and to some of the say performance within it, we can't write this differently, Sam, any more than we would rewrite the minutes of a meeting, because the minutes of a meeting are that fixed point in time. So this is the report for that period of time. Other things have happened since then, and the fact that it is the report that the partnership has put together under its statutory responsibilities also says that we are simply receiving it and not dealing with it in the way that we'll probably deal with the report a little bit later in this agenda, which is quarterly KPI, where we're kind of living it as a live document. That was all I wanted to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor. And we'll draw a line at that one now. Councillor Henry, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks, Tracy and Colin. But notwithstanding your comments, I'm still want to ask a couple of questions, if it's okay. On the bottom of page 27, the report identifies a range of the report identifies that figures suggest that the local authority and our partners still have work to do to ensure that move-in plans on following the end of the child protection planning period are suitably robust to ensure that families are better supported to sustain positive changes that have been made and that risks continue to be minimized. So I just need to know, how is the authority addressing this? And my other question was about what have been the key learning outcomes from the 4 rapid reviews that have been completed over the last year, and how will the learning from these reviews be embedded to further develop effective safeguarding practices? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll ask Amanda to identify who's best placed to answer those 2 questions. And thank you for the question, Councillor.
I think I probably can help with the first question. So in terms of children who have been subject to a child protection plan, you'll note from the report that the numbers of children have reduced who have been subject to a plan. What we always do at the end of a child protection plan is clearly look at the progress that's been made for the child, for the family, and at that point identify whether there is any further sort of like support or input that's required. For some families there isn't a need, in other families there is a need, so we continue to support through a child in need plan. We are currently looking at, and we've audited some children who've been subject to child protection plans and children who have become subject to repeat child protection plans, in order for us to understand why there might be a repeat and what we may have missed from the first plan to the second plan, the subsequent plan, in relation to what support we've offered. So that has just taken place, so we'll be learning from that. So it's something that we're aware of and we're looking at constantly, really, in terms of making sure that children have got the right support at the right time and that ongoing support should they need it. Sam, can you answer the second question about the rapid review?
So I think the question was about a summary of the key learning from the reviews and how they're being embedded. Was that correct? Thank you. Okay, so there have been 4 rapid reviews completed in the reporting period. The first, really the key outcome, was around safe sleep. And you'll see on page 29 of the report the work that the Safer Sleep Steering Group have been doing with regard to the toolkits, being more established, and sort of the work around that. What I would say is that the work that's been done on the toolkit by that Safe Sleep Group has been adopted again by several partnerships nationally. So the work that's been done by that group has been recognised as particularly strong. In terms of that particular review around safe sleep, there wasn't a huge amount of learning in terms of what practitioners could have done better. Unfortunately, we do continue nationally to see deaths as a result of unsafe sleep practice, and we've outlined really what we've done in terms of trying to sort of strengthen that work locally. The second 2 reviews with regard to physical harm to young babies in 2 very different circumstances. One of them found particular learning about work between sort of health and the local authority in terms of effective planning around discharge, and that work has well underway and nearly complete, and indeed the panel didn't feel that we needed to do a further review. They thought that the quality of learning we'd taken from that was strong. The second, physical harm, is unfortunately an extremely sad case whereby sorry, I've mixed the 2 up. So the third one's the one I was just talking about. The second one is a particularly sad case with regard to purposeful harm by a parent with no previous history, and so there wasn't a huge amount of learning about the multi-agency work that could have gone before that. It was a very sad event. And the 4th review was with regard to the very sad death by suicide for a young person. And indeed, what the partnership decided to do with this one, as with the 4th, which is discussed here, was a creative piece of work. So as a partnership, we said to the national panel, we don't feel we have the statutory requirement is met to do a review, and the panel agreed with that. But we decided to creatively do that work anyway, because we felt that as a partnership there could be learning and themes that we could take forward around sort of adolescent mental health and risk around social media. And the panel were particularly complimentary of the decision by the partnership to do that, because it brings a level of scrutiny that we're not required to take, but it felt the right thing to do. So we're waiting on the outcomes of those reviews. They're underway now. And in terms of the embedding of the reviews, for risk of repeating myself slightly from the answer earlier, we have that really effective circle of learning between the learning and workforce development group and the review group, where we're able to embed all of the learning into the workforce offer. And we also have the sort of partnership newsletter, the Safeguarding Children Today provision, where we're able to do that and then review from practitioners how it's feeling it's impacting on their practice.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Henry.
It's a bit of a curiosity as well, actually. Thanks very much for the answer. It's the bit about I think it's on page 24, at the bottom of 24, 25. We talk about, I'm not sure, hospitals. Yeah, it's about, we're now in October, and we're still waiting for Sherwood Forest's hospital trust assurance or pathway. What is the delay?
Who wants to take that?
Yeah, look at the very bottom of page 24. Yeah.
I will answer that question in writing, if I may, Errol, having had the opportunity to engage with health partners who aren't present. There should have been a rep here, but Maria's clearly not been able to make a meeting unless any colleagues from Children's Services of Nottinghamshire County Council can help. Yeah, but we can't, so we take that back. I'll take that back. I would have expected Rosa would have been able to give the answer, and kind of reflects the awkwardness, and my apologies with regards to not having the officers in the room. That would have been helpful to your answer, so I do apologise to you for that.
Councillor Henry, you okay? Happy with that? Yeah. Okay. So we'll get that answer to all members. Martin, yeah. Okay. James,
thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. And thanks to officers for the report and all the hard work that's been going on over the last few years to address the issues around safeguarding. I've mentioned this before at committee about school-based practitioners in the education sector and the significant part they play in keeping children safe. That has become more and more of their role, and it's very, very involved and places quite a significant amount of stress on them. So page 25, I'm very encouraged about the commitment to working more closely with school-based staff. It does say over the 23-24 period engagement work is planned with education sector leaders. So my first question really is, could someone give an update as to how effective they feel that more robust working with school leaders and practitioners has been over the period?
Yes, it's me again, I'm afraid. There's the sort of levels. So working together requires the embedding of engagement at both strategic and operational level. And so there's sort of been a two-pronged approach to that. So the first has been, we've set up some business breakfasts with leaders from across the school community, which were really, really well attended, in order to develop from them their view about how we achieve this. So lots of different views expressed, and what we're doing is working through that into, again, an action plan about how to achieve that at a strategic level. Then at an operational level, again, the same piece of work has been done in the DSL forum that already exists to ask school leaders how they feel they can best be involved in the partnership decision making at that operational level. So we will be able to, that work's been in the current reporting period, and then we'll be able to give you quite a significant update on that in the next annual report. But safe to say, really strong engagement and really good turnout, lots of kind of creative ideas and commitment expressed to make this work going forward. And I think the other thing to say is in the front door work, which is, of course, is partnership led as well, has been the commitment to education voices being in that space, and the approach we've taken around developing tests which are co-produced with our partners has been to have an education voice as the kind of key referrers into all of that decision making as we've been going along as well.
Thank you. Yes,
James?
because I would say that until recently, I think educational practitioners have felt slightly out of the strategic loop, but what people are telling me is much more involvement, so I'm grateful for that. My second point relates to page 27. This final section there about the attendance and timeliness of discussions around multi-agency. With all due respect, that final paragraph that starts section 48 strategy seems very, very vague. And I'm sure there'll be a report, but what I'm reading between the lines is probably in line with what I hear all the time in schools, that when there is a strategy meeting, schools are always there. Attendance of other agencies is very patchy and often leads to additional pressure put on the school to address the pressing needs of that child or that family. So apologies if that's not what it's going to say, but that is what colleagues in school continue to report to me, that there is a really significant urgent need to get the right people round the table when those meetings happen.
Okay, James, thank you for the point. Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I recognise the challenges. I'm not convinced that it is as bad as the question suggests. Amanda, you had indicated you wanted to add something to Sam's previous answer. If you'd like to pick that up, but are you also able to pick up James's question? And thank you.
So, in terms of the previous question, we also provide supervision to designated safeguarding leads. So there's practice consultants who are identified across the county who will go into schools to give advice and some safeguarding supervision to the designated safeguarding leads within schools. Clearly, that takes the school to be engaged in that, and we would encourage, all of our schools to do so. So there's that. In terms of the strategy discussions, that hasn't been brought to my attention in terms of education not being part of those discussions. We are doing a lot of work in the front door that I think Sam referenced earlier, which is clearly around, sort of like engagement of all partners, but really significantly education, because, schools are the place where children are every day. They know children, so absolutely we would want to include schools in any strategy discussions. As you are aware, sometimes these meetings are slightly tricky to arrange because they have to happen really, really quickly. But it's ongoing work, and it's something that we are addressing within the Front Door project.
I think if I heard James, I heard a slightly different question. I think he was suggesting that the schools are engaging actively, but feel that partners are not attending as they ought. Is that correct, James? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yes, so when we have strategy meetings with the different agencies need to be involved, often the school is there, but other agencies aren't able to make it, give apologies at late notice.
Is it strategy discussions or is it core group meetings? I think it might be core group meetings.
Well, the point, it's under the section that talks about sections 47 strategy discussion audit has taken place, and that paragraph is very vague, with an initial draft report in progress. From the recommendations, noted some further work to enhance the strategy discussion process, to continue work to safeguard children, some further learning. So I understood that whole point to be about the attendance and timeliness of strategy discussions to make sure that the needs of the child in that review is best met.
There we go. Right, can I interject here? I think rather than getting into a debate about one side's perspective and another, I think we've discussed any feedback that's constructive is welcomed. If some of that feedback is anecdotal, then there's no problem with that, because I have no doubt that that feedback has been considered. It's not a one-off view. It's something that's developed over a period of time. I think it would be helpful where we do have anecdotal feedback like that, if where schools are finding some of those issues from all sectors, that some meat is put on that bone for the departmental officers, cabinet members, etc. Because we don't doubt the determination to make improvements and the hard work that's done within in the teams, but we have to also recognise that sometimes we do get anecdotal feedback like we just had, but if we can put some flesh onto that would be really helpful for the teams too. So as things happen and arise, if you've got absences or concerns about the involvement of whichever partner it might be, then please feed that back into us. That'd be really useful. Thank you. So James, does that help from your point of view? Thank you. Okay, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. And I think what I'm about to say might reinforce your point. James is right. In 2019, Ofsted found that we needed to improve the attendance of other agencies at strategy meetings. On the 3 weeks that they spent with us looking at literally hundreds of cases, they concluded that strategy discussions are well attended by the right professionals and comprehensively consider children's risks and needs. That was in May 2024. What we will do, just to double check on the perception that James has shared, is to look at our data again, our most recent data again, and compare that, because we think we've improved over time. If, James, you're identifying a re-emerging thing, that's really helpful. We need to know about that and we'll respond to that. But I don't think that's the case. Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe it's a conversation as well for some of you guys to have offline. Okay, thank you. We're going to take Councillor Lee and then Nigel, and then we're going to move on to the next agenda item. Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Kevin, thank you. The problem with reports like this is they are historical and you are looking back. I've picked up a few bits, but I don't want to get into it too much, because the report mentions COVID and the impacts on COVID still. Are we still finding that as an issue in our service? Because in the report it mentions it. And what measures are you putting in place to try and resolve these issues? And how are we still years on from this issue and it's still causing a concern?
Sorry, John, I'm just going to pick up on that and say, can you identify an area in the report that you're questioning then, with a COVID reference?
Jono, do you want to come back to that question?
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take Nigel. Can you come give us your question, please?
Too many Nigels in the room. Hello. First of all, can I just underline how delighted I am that so many different agencies are working together, including education. I firmly believe the needs of children will only be met when there's effective communication between bodies and between agencies. My observation, and perhaps this is a future conversation that we could take forward, is there is one gap in safeguarding practice across the country. This is not about Nottinghamshire, and it is in the area of suicide awareness training. In my particular world, this is in relation to school staff, so that in the corridor and in the classroom, staff are trained to spot those signs that tell them this child could be having suicidal thoughts and feelings. And I think there continues to be a gap nationally in provision for this type of training. My own wish would be that just as school staff receive statutory safeguarding training, that suicide awareness training would walk hand in hand with that. So I just want to suggest that today, perhaps as a future discussion and something we could take forward.
Okay, Nigel, thank you for the point. Does anybody want to respond to that?
Thank you, Nigel. I think it's a very, very difficult and sensitive area to consider at all, let alone training. From a personal perspective, I would not necessarily want to see it as mandatory training because we don't know the stories behind the individuals who might be faced with it. So as well as seeking to protect the children, there's something about protecting the staff around the children. That's a very personal view. But I welcome all training, and if we are seeing particular risks and vulnerabilities amongst our school children, then any increase in training and awareness of that particular challenge is obviously welcomed.
Nigel.
I appreciate that you made it clear that was your personal view. If I can just add a bit of substance to my observation. When I was a head teacher, I led my school through the impact of teenage suicide 3 times. And out of that, I have developed a deep concern about the level of the inadequacy, if you like, or insufficiency of training around this. I have taken suitable training on 2 occasions and led my staff through some of it. And it brings out some of the most important points to be aware of, one of which, for example, is if a child who has seemed down in mood tells you that everything's okay now, what the trained staff member needs to hear is that possibly what they've just told you is that they've formed their suicide plan. They've decided how they're going to take their lives, and sometimes they articulate that by saying everything's okay now. Also, learning to hear what the child is not telling you, if you like, what's between the lines, what's between the comments. And thirdly, for staff to be trained in understanding that you are not planting an idea of suicide in a child's head if you ask the question directly, are you feeling suicidal? Staff are trained to pose the question, to be direct, to be open, and to understand you are not sending a child down that route. You could actually be saving their life. So my view remains, just to repeat it, that this is a serious gap in provision nationally, and it is something that needs to be addressed. It would, in my belief, it would save lives.
Okay, Nigel, thank you for the input. I think I'm not sure if it was July, certainly a couple of full councils ago, we had quite a long debate about suicide training, and certainly there were some views, and I'm going to paraphrase a little from some of the members who had very close personal experience of either suicide with family or friends or personal situations. And one of the views expressed by some of those members was that suicide training that was imposed potentially brought up issues within themselves which may reignite problems. And so there was quite a discussion about it may not be necessary in all cases, particularly with people who've gone through some of this or have experience of this, and experience in lieu of some of the more formalised training, that they don't necessarily need that training to be able to recognise things that they have personal experience of. So that's perhaps where sometimes the comments come from some of us about, the training, yes, be provided, but not necessarily imposed on everyone, because there is the risk that it actually makes things worse for some individuals. I hope that sort of helps a little.
I think my final observation on this is that exactly the same principle applies to normal safeguarding training. For example, the training that staff receive around abuse can, of course, trigger past experiences for staff who have themselves suffered abuse. So I'm not sure that I see the difference between these 2 scenarios. And my final point is to offer my help. If there is a decision at any point to take this forward, I would be happy to be part of that discussion and to explore what future developments could look like.
Well, thank you. I mean, my comments were not meant to either challenge, agree, or disagree. I'm just trying to put over, I think, where the members of the council came from. So I'm going to draw a line at that. Other than Peter, you'd like to make a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, and I know it's not featured in the annual report, so it's a bit of a tangent, but obviously any mandated training comes through national policy, not local decision, which I think we need to recognise. But here in Nottinghamshire, we do have the Not Alone resource and website, which I'd just like to promote, and you can access that site at notalone.org.uk. The Not Alone website's tailored for children and young people, for education professionals, and for parents and carers, and gives guidance and support around issues including self-harm and suicide, and actually will also lead practitioners to resources that our educational psychology service have developed around self-harm and suicide, and a support package and training that is available within Nottinghamshire. And just finally, our educational psychology service also provide critical and traumatic incident support to education professionals who might be managing these issues.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much. Councillor Lee, yeah.
Chairman, thank you. It was from the entire report. So what in my notes, what I have put is reading the report, is COVID still having an effect on the service? Question mark. So I'm guessing from the entire report, I'm asking if COVID is still having an issue on the services.
Yes. Who wants to take that? Councillor Taylor.
I don't even know how to answer, Jono, because it's such a sort of a wide and an open question. We are not living in COVID times, therefore some of the dynamics that we experienced in trying to safeguard children when we weren't seeing them because they weren't necessarily in school, when we couldn't access homes, those dynamics are no longer with us. So to that extent, I would say that no, COVID is not still having an impact on our practice in terms of safeguarding. There are some legacy issues more widely in that, say, school attendance is down, and some of that has become where parents and or children are anxious. We're getting school refusers at that extra non-attendance. So non-attendance figures have gone up. So it might be true to say if we are not seeing children because they're not attending, then the risks exist. So if you want to call that a legacy of COVID because of the non-attendance, then yes, one might say that the risks of not seeing children and therefore not seeing that they are vulnerable and at risk perhaps exist and are still with us. And that's where one of the other work streams, not covered in this report because it's not particularly pertinent to this report today, is the work on improving school attendance generally.
Chairman, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Like I'm defending you, is you individuals, the council is dealing with ramifications of something that no council has ever dealt with before. Like we don't know what the ramifications of COVID and not seeing children and them being at home and being homeschooled. I can tell you what I'm dealing with my children, but the truth is there's going to be, in my opinion, there's going to be a legacy of stuff coming through that the officers don't even know what the implications are going to be 10, 15 years time. Children will have trauma. We know that. That's a fact. But the parents will have trauma from COVID. It was a scary time. We know, looking at it in the past, it was really scary. We didn't know if we were going to live past a day. And the children had to suffer with that. And we know from World War II and past, the children will suffer with the trauma of that and dealing with that. And that's kind of the point I'm making, is the report's really good. But I think reading the report myself is I'm personally seeing legacies of COVID, and I think sometimes we need to give the council and the officers a bit of slack of that, because these are issues that nobody even thought about 5 years ago.
Okay, John, thank you. Colin, you still want to make a
I
comment?
will try to be really brief. Yeah, I think we're beginning to digress off safeguarding child protection. Yeah, there is an issue around school attendance. There's an issue, and Longfield published a report on Friday morning that's worth, I would point colleagues towards reading, around even those children who are attending, particularly beginning school, pre-verbal, non-verbal, in nappies. Yeah. I visited 2 schools in Mansfield primary schools on Friday, the day of the publication of the report, coincidentally, and I heard from both those head teachers in the Multi-Academy Trust, they have not seen the level of child development delay in foundation stage, that they're now seeing. And this is the children who were bought coincidentally. These are the children who have reached their 4th birthday, and are now attending school. Those are the children right at the sweet spot of being born during COVID. So it's not a child protection issue yet, although we do know the links between global development delays, speech and language, etc., but there is something to be done still with regards to recovery, for our children and young people, that Cavan Collins, had a plan for, but we were unable, to fund, with in England. It's not a Nottinghamshire challenge, but it's a conversation that we are having, and I think James and Nigel would recognise that in their primary schools around global delay.
Colin, thank you for the explanation. I'm going to move on and just ask Councillor Purdue-Horan, as Vice Chairman, do you have anything you'd like to add? Thank you very much. So just confirm with Martin to read out any summary of any additions we need to add to the recommendations.
I'm doing it now. I think the only point we've had the information is circulated to members on the development of the ICS pathway for children and young people presenting at emergency departments. So we'll get that circulated to all members when it's prepared.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to take a vote on the recommendations as shown on page 17. All in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. And we are going to move on to agenda item 5. And so I'm going to invite Councillor Sam Smith, Cabinet Member for Education and Send, to introduce the report, please, on progress with the recommendations of Scrutiny Review for Education, Health and Care Plans. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And your introduction is going to be far better than mine. This paper is an update on progress that the Council is making following the recommendations arising from the committee's review on the EHCPs. Cabinet accepted all 11 recommendations at our meeting in December 2023, and Appendix 1 highlights what progress we're making in line with those recommendations. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, do we have any officers that wish to make any contribution? Peter.
Yeah, just very briefly. I think this was by my recollection, the first of the scrutiny reviews that took place within the new process, and it was really helpful to be fully involved in that at the time. In December 2023, the initial actions to respond to those recommendations were outlined. What we've provided is an update in terms of additional activity that's taken place. I think most of the recommendations you will probably find are mirrored in other documents that we review in Scrutiny Committee, and actually most of them now fit within the business as usual work around our SEND services and the SEND improvement work that's underway. So there will be some duplication across both of those reporting processes, and I think that just shows the kind of movement that's taken place since that review took place, which I think was probably the summer of 23.
Thank you, Peter. And so I will move the recommendations on page 38 and seek a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm now going to open up to the floor for debate, and Councillor Creamer, can you take the first point?
Apologies. Welcome to the positive report. Things are moving forward. It's just some basic clarifications rather than anything else. What have been the most significant achievements in delivery of the activity that's been carried out in the EHCP since members carried out the review last year? And how has those challenges been overcome, carried out? And what remains and what interventions may be needed in the future? So it's more of a question than a possibility. It's more than anything else. So we are addressing the challenges present and the future, basically. So yes, moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Creamer, for that question. One of the biggest challenges is the increase in the demand for education, health and care plans. That is definitely not slowing down. Year to date, on the amount of requests for assessments, there's been an increase of 23.1%. That's an increase year to date from where we were in 2023. That's a significant challenge for this council, but across the country. And I think what the biggest achievement we can take from that is, although there's been a significant increase in the demand, there's also been an increase in the amount that we are responding to within the 20-week time frame. And year to date, we sit at about 36%. That's a 57% increase on where we were this time last year. So although demand's rising, so is the rate to which we are responding to. I think that's a really good achievement for the council, but of course there's more work to do, and we continue to do that. And another thing that I'm really proud of, and I say it in every committee and I will not apologise for it, is the work that our SEND education pathway officers do. So nationally, the target for responding to education, health and care plans is 50%. We're nearly there, but that still leaves 50% nationally who aren't being responded to within the 20 weeks. What has Nottinghamshire County Council done to help address that 50% who aren't being responded to within 20 weeks, or 60% in our case at the council? We've employed 5, I think it is, Peter will tell me if I'm wrong on that, 5 SEND pathway officers. Not every authority has done that. And their job is to liaise with children and families who are on the waiting list to ensure not only are they being kept up to date on how their application is progressing, but they're also getting signposted to support when they require it. That is a huge step forward. So they're not having to wait longer than 20 weeks and then get told what support is available. They're being told what support is available during that waiting process. And I think that is something this authority should be very, very proud of. I certainly am, as the cabinet member for SEND. So there's 2 things, Councillor Creamer, that I hope has assisted that answer. I'm going to hand over to Peter to tell me if I've missed anything.
You just missed one of our education pathway officers, Councillor Smith. There's 6, and we would happily have an additional 6 because of the work they do with our school communities and our parents and carers at the earliest stage in an education, health and care assessment process. I think the other thing that I would just reference in terms of significant impact has been the financial investment of the council into improving the experiences and outcomes of children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. That's over £1.5 million last financial year. We are seeking to continually seek additional investment into this area in order to sustain some of that progress. And just finally, the other thing I think, which is an ongoing piece of work, but we have done a lot as a partnership in this space, is to improve the relationship with schools and education settings where most of our children and young people are spending their time. So that early identification support and getting the support right there. And we've been embarking on quite a number of pieces of work with education settings, more of which I'm sure we'll mention during the course of this meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I thought it was 6, and just a slight a question on that. I think all 6 are fully trained in work now, and everything's been. They're actually coping with the workload at the moment. There's not going to be a collapse in the future or something else. So at the moment, the 6 are actually coping with the pressures. Is that correct?
Yes. So the education pathway officers are linked into districts. And there's some crossover there, but that gives them the ability to work with families and get to know families, get to know health providers, and get to know education settings in those areas. Obviously, if a really strong graduated approach is being followed, there's less requirement for somebody to step into that space because the needs of the young person are well known and support is already in place. But they can play a significant role where that isn't evident, and that helps manage that capacity. But yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pete. Thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Carr.
Right. We can see there's been a good progress regarding the graduated response for children with SEND who do not have EHCP plans, because I think that has been one of our downfalls, because the communication for some families has been quite poor, and why they've gone to the Ombudsman because of So I see that as really, really positive and a good way to go. I think we still have a good way to go, if I'm honest. I'd like to know how many assessments are outstanding at this moment in time, because, again, we haven't got up to 50%, so we have got over 50% of young people still waiting for these EHCP plans. And actually, that means we are failing these families, because, yes, we have got a graduated response, but how effective is that graduated response? Thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Cahan. It's very technical. I will pass on to Peter regarding the amount that are outstanding for you.
Just firstly, I'll just say yes, there's definitely a long way to go in Nottinghamshire and across England and Wales, I think, to be fair, and we will continue as a not just as a council, but as a partnership and as stakeholders together, we will continue to put all of our energy into improving that. Certainly improving the graduated response is significantly important to us, because that is about identifying and meeting need at the earliest possible point and reducing that escalation. There's been a significant piece of work across stakeholders to map that out in a way that is visual and accessible, and that will be going on a local offer. There's some details of that within this paper and the next paper, but there's also work underway with our family Senkos, our families of schools, and our multi-academy trusts, and we've developed a multi-academy trust SEND network where we're bringing together that expertise across Nottinghamshire to impact on that system, impact on that graduated approach. And I've got a meeting with them actually this Friday, and that'll be the second meeting of involving our MAT SEND leads as well. So trying to lean on the support from across our education sector rather than just being seen as a local authority responsibility. Regarding the waiting list, it tends to fluctuate depending on the level of the number of assessments that are being conducted. We currently have 5,111 children and young people with education, health and care plans within Nottinghamshire, which is staggering if you look back 5 years. And if we project that forward, it's not something that can continue in that same rate, because we need to target resource where it's needed and make sure that we're meeting needs throughout a continuum of support for children and young people. There's about 300, and it will change, and I'd need to check in with my educational psychology service and my SEND statutory service for the exact figure, but it's about 300 young people on the waiting list. In the last year, the waiting list, the wait time was 12 months. Currently, that wait time has been reduced to 3 months at the current stage. So we've seen significant improvement in the length of time that somebody will wait for an education, health and care plan assessment over the last 12 months, and that it speaks to that investment that's been made and the collective work around meeting and addressing and identifying need. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Callahan.
No, I just think it's really important the graduated response continues, because that is where we shouldn't actually see as many waiting if we do that.
I absolutely agree, and interestingly, I'll completely agree. I've been meeting with directors of education across the region, and we talk around our different approaches, and in Nottinghamshire, being able to access support and being able to access funding in order to bring an additional provision to meet needs without requiring an education, health and care plan. It's not the way it happens across every local authority. It's one of the benefits here in Nottinghamshire. And actually, when we're benchmarking the funding that's available to schools and education settings, it's often at the higher end in Nottinghamshire without requiring that statutory intervention of an education, health and care plan. So it's a really positive feature of the system here.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the detail, Peter. I'd just like to add in there that whilst we recognise there's been some improvements, but at the same time still recognise that we have 60% that are not done within the 20 weeks. It was just interesting to note the total number on EHCPs at being 5,000, with 300 still waiting for their EHCPs, which is just 6% of the total children in that, I can't think of the right word, but within that group. Just puts an interesting, slightly different perspective on that. But thank you. Thanks for your question, Councillor Callahan. Councillor Henry.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I think Councillor Smith and Peter did answer quite a bit of a question I had in mind, but I'll still put something there. It's welcome. The report is welcome. It is welcome, and we recognise that there's a lot of issues that we have to manage here, and it's national. It's not just locally. So I understand that. But how has the activity that has been carried out since the completion of the review improved the experience of children and families of the whole process of the ESCP process itself?
I think in a nutshell, the biggest improvement has been about valuing the relationship with the children and the young people and their families. And that, so that the education pathway officer is just one element of that. The work with schools and early year settings being another. It's about knowing, understanding, and meeting needs, not just about process. And I think that previously we knew that some of the processes were really challenged and the performance was very low. That as that performance has increased, it's not been at the expense of relationship and building and valuing relationship and understanding and knowing families and those that work with them. It's an area we still have a lot of work to do, and we're committed to pursuing that, but it is about a strength-based relational approach. I think that has the biggest impact on children and families. Is trying to move away from a place where there's an adversarial nature to it into one where we're actually all working collectively for the best outcomes for our children and young people. And I think that's really evident in the SEND strategy that's been recently launched and publicised here in Nottinghamshire as well. Thank you.
And just to build on that, I think Colin has hosted, and was the health there as well, and Rosa from the health, so the SEND partnership has hosted meetings in every district, both online and face to face, to hear from families and hear what they're saying, what I call the real world, and take that feedback on board, but also update them on the SEND improvement work we're doing, because there is a SEND improvement board that's chaired by Dave Lenehan, who's here today, but I'm not sure everybody reads the minutes of that meeting, despite them being so interesting. So it was important work that Colin and colleagues have done from health to go out there and update families on that, but also take back some feedback. And hundreds of families attended those in every single district, both online and face to face, which is really positive.
Councillor Henry.
He's answered the question I was going to ask him. So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. We've just gone through an EHCP for my girl, so I know the process very well. It was interesting because I used to be on governance and ethics, so I dealt with when we maybe didn't do everything that we should have. So when I went into the process with my wife and my little girl, I was a little bit concerned and worried. However, and I hate to say this, it's been superb. No, I'm going to, but I'm also going to throw a negative in there as well, but it has been superb. What we found is within a few weeks, not even a few weeks, within a few days, we got an email saying, just to make you aware that there is a delay. So we were aware of that delay. We then had an online meeting. Now, the person wasn't local, but I wasn't that so concerned about that. Superb. Engaged with everybody that they needed to make sure the report was done. However, in comparisons to that, we have a friend who's always also going through the same, and they weren't happy. So our outcome we're really happy with, and it's got everything in there. However, their outcome they're not happy with, and the difference is the primary school for our little girl engaged. The primary school for the other person did not engage, and that is different. And that is a massive different outcome. Is we are happy with ours, and they're not happy with theirs. And sometimes I think the county council, and I wouldn't have said this a year ago, gets the negatives of the HCPs and the outcomes because maybe all the services haven't engaged properly or haven't engaged to the level that they should have. So really happy. My wife is really happy. My little girl is really happy. However, sometimes I think we may need to, when we do get complaints, we might need to dig a little bit deeper to find out why maybe other services haven't engaged as much. But well done, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that contribution, Councillor Lee. Councillor Smith.
Just to quickly address that, thank you, Councillor Lee. Really great to hear that your family have had a good journey through the process. Really important, as I said at the start, to I think it was Councillor Creamer's question, there are going to be delays for 60% of the families who are going through the process at this council at the moment, 50% nationally, and that's why the SEND pathway officers play a vital part in just letting you know that there's going to be a delay. So you're not sat at home thinking, oh, in 20 weeks, 15 weeks, 10 weeks, 5 weeks, I'm going to get an outcome. If you're told within 3 days, I think you said, Councillor Lee, correct me if I've got that timescale wrong, if you're told within 3 days there's going to be a delay, but Mr. Lee, Mrs. Lee, here's the support you can get through your school, here's the support you can get through other services, then brilliant. And that's what we should be doing. I'm really pleased that it's working there. Just on engagement of schools, this council has what we call district SENCO officers that are there to support the SENCOs of schools to engage in the process. And I encourage the family who you referenced to get in touch, and we can signpost them to that support.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Peter, did you indicate you wanted to comment?
No, but I'll always come in if given a chance, Councillor Trona, so I'm quite happy to give you something else. I think it's just building on that, really helpful to have positive feedback, and whilst I recognise that's not the experience for everybody, I think what you've just said speaks to the part that we all play together, and it's back to that, actually meeting the needs of children and young people with SEND is everybody's responsibility. Schools, health providers, GPs, social care, we all play a role in that, parents and carers, we play it collectively. And that's where our focus has to be. Whilst I recognise this paper is about education, health and care plans, actually it's all of that other work around that child and young person that's so important. And whilst we do have families who wait longer than we would want, if we look at national benchmarking, and I've not got the figures in front of me, I think across the country that 50% that aren't having their needs identified and met in a timely way, many of them wait more than a year in some parts of England, and in Nottinghamshire, our timeliness, although it's not at that national level, that maximum wait of 3 months beyond is significantly less than other parts of the country, and that's really positive.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Councillor Bergin-Boran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm very pleased to see that we've got a positive report going forward. However, I know that our Director of Children and Families is a football fan, I think, and from my understanding, football analogies might be something I would understand better. We're not in the Premiership. And I'd like to ask, going forward, where would the SEND partnership consider progress to be positive next year when we look at the annual report? We're at 36% at the moment. We're not going to get to 100%, I'm sure. What would you like to be sort of heading towards?
Okay, who's going to take that? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. What a wonderful opportunity to introduce Dame Christine Lennon, who is our independent chair of the SEND Partnership Improvement Board, which includes the County Council and our health partners. And not only will Dame Christine be able to give you an independent view of Nottinghamshire, she also feeds into government on a national scale, so may be able to provide some detail of that as well.
But before we pass on to Dame Christine, I'm afraid the football analogy is lost on me, Councillor Purdo-Horan, as a Blundell Park season ticket holder and a Grimsby Town fan. Yeah, I don't recognise anything to do with football logistics, statistics or strategy, having lost 3-0 to Doncaster by half-time on Saturday.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Yeah, happy to come in. I mean, I've been chairing this board for what, a year? Sorry, now. And I think for me, one of the things that's been really, really important is the strength of the partnership now is just light years from where it was. It's a really strong partnership approach, and that makes a big difference because, as you will have seen from your experience, Councillor Lee, putting together a good EHC plan, working with families and whatever, is not just the job of the County Council. It has to have health, it has to have schools, it has to have the ongoing positive engagement of parent and carers. And I think over the last year, the county has worked really, really hard to make that partnership happen. I think the other thing that has happened in the last year and you see by the reports, is a detailed analytics of where we were. So there's a real ownership of where we were now, and a real ownership and understanding of what that was, and therefore moving forward. And I think the county should be commended on the resources that you put in. I think going forward, I mean, you know, if you went back to football, my experience is different. I've grown up in a house with Arsenal season ticket holders. If they lose anything, they get really, really annoyed very quickly. And then they learn to live with despair. So that's fine. In terms of where we are, I would actually start to put Nottinghamshire in the Premiership. You know, the inspection process is a really difficult one. And I think it's interesting that it's now been, that the monitoring process for this has now been suspended. And the government is about to issue a formal consultation on whether this inspection methodology is the best way of understanding what is actually happening in the world of SEND. And that is partly because we have lost ourselves in knowing what good looks like. Now, my work with national government leads me to believe that there will be significant changes in SEND reform fairly quickly. And that actually what we are trying to do nationally is get back to a point where almost this report will be the wrong report. Because what government is keen to do is to understand, working closely with schools and others, what's going on. We cannot get to a point where 18.9% of children have EHC plans. We don't have children who have that level of need. We need to go back to what they were designed for, which is about 2.7% of children, 3% of children who actually need the services of education, health and care to come together. Most children need really good quality education with early intervention with the right people at the right time. As the government's untangling itself a bit, there's always a sort of nervous place for people, because it always makes the system bounce, to look at what are the reforms going forward. So what you're looking in Nottinghamshire is making the very best of a system that really doesn't work very well, and actually trying to do that. And I think the challenge of that, especially because no council has unlimited resource, no health system does either, is actually the gains over time now are likely to be more marginal. So the system has been looked at, taken apart, put back together again, and resources gone in, as Councillor Smith says, with the pathway officers, in the way that we think makes the most difference. Therefore, the trajectory in these reports is likely to slow, because actually you're doing the most you can with the resources you've got. So until we start to see fundamental change nationally from government in terms of where we are, that's where we sit.
Okay, Dame Christine, thank you very much for that, both interesting and enlightening perspective, but also pragmatic.
If I may finish on a positive note before we move on to the next item.
I'm not moving on just yet, so if you just give me a second. Just give me a second, I'll come back to you quite happily, Councillor Quigley. But thank you for that information and feedback. Councillor Purdy-Horan, do you have anything else?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was extremely enlightening.
Councillor Quigley.
Thank you, Chairman. Just speaking from positive experience, having spent the last 5 years as chairman of a multi-academy trust, and also seeing the system with some of my constituents and the issues that they had, I think underlining what Peter was saying about other funding streams that we can access, and not wanting to spend all your budget, Peter, but I think that members have a role to play in that, in making sure that the schools, and I think particularly my experience has been that primary schools are probably the worst at, I'm probably going to get shot for this, but are probably the worst at accessing that alternative method of funding before they actually get an ECHP. And I've had to point some of my constituencies in the right direction and get them to talk to the SENCOs and officers at the school to ensure that they know and are aware of accessing that money. I think that situation has got better, and certainly I would say that none of our academy schools are not aware of it, but I think we as members have a role to play in actually signposting people towards it when we get angry parents ringing us up or accosting us in the street sometimes even, and saying my child hasn't had ECHP, they're waiting now, and we haven't got any access to any funding. But there is funding available. As I say, I don't want to spend all your budget, Peter, but I think members have a role to play, and I would encourage all members to ensure that when they get these inquiries from distraught parents who are waiting, that they make sure they have been pointed in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Quigley. An interesting point and a positive one. I think I'd like to say that you made the point, Dame Christine, about data and information. I think it's one of the things that I think we as a scrutiny committee over certainly the course of this calendar year, we've asked for information to be presented differently. We think that we've got information that's more relevant. I'm sure it can be improved upon going forward, but certainly as a county councillor and within my own division, I've certainly seen some challenges with the HCP and for some of the families that have been in touch with me, but I've certainly seen a positive direction of travel. We've gone from people not having any idea when something might happen to, I see within the figures that the longest lead times have been pulled right back in, but certainly within my own experience, families becoming happier that they're getting more positive response. It's a quicker response. So yes, it's interesting points that you made, Dame Christine, and I'd just like to thank you again for coming today.
Well, you're welcome. Just on the data, actually, it's worth noting that one of the pieces of work we set nationally on the improvement boards was to understand data, because as we say, we take information from a whole range of sources. We have to understand what's happening in provider health trusts, how long is a waiting list. We have to understand what's happening in schools. We have to understand what's happening in authority. And in Nottinghamshire, we've used a health data analyst to help us do that, to really understand data structures in the NHS and to understand how to work with these across with the local authority and stuff. And as a result of that, we've been working with the Department for Education to bring together a couple of data experts, including Nottinghamshire, because actually the national data here is now better than it is in most places.
Thank you very much.
If I may, Chair, final comment. That was reinforced by the Department for Education and Improvement Advisors just on Thursday, where they described the piece of work that Simon Frampton from the NHS has led on as being exemplary. Yeah, the best they've seen. And Dame Christine is trying to pinch Simon, only part time, to influence national data collection.
Colin, thank you. Thanks for that input. Martin, do we have any additions to add to our recommendations?
No, everything's been covered in the response.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a vote and show of hands on the recommendations that we have on page 38. All those in favour? And again, unanimous, so thank you very much. Right, agenda item 6. I am conscious of our time and that we are talking about SEND issues again, but I am going to introduce agenda item 6, which is partnership progress in improving the experiences and outcomes for children and young people with SEND. So firstly, I'm going to ask Colin Pettigrew if he'd like to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. And as I think you alluded to in the previous agenda item, we began to bleed into this agenda item. Yeah, so I won't repeat stuff. The report is there. It covers in particular priority action 1, which is around education, health and care plans, both the development of them and the review of them, which we've deep dived in the previous agenda item, with 3 outcomes there. And in paras 23 to 24, to 43, sorry, look at priority action 2, which is in the main around health services. And again, I apologise that we don't have a colleague from the partnership here as we were expecting, to cover that. But Peter, I think, can speak on priority action 1, but I think he'll be repeating much of what he's said. But you can see that we're making good progress, but with lots more to do. On this agenda.
Okay, Colin, thank you very much. And I'm also going to ask Dame Christine Lenham, do you have anything you'd wish to add further?
I think that's a good summary. I think we have made incredibly good progress over the last year or so, and that's reflected in the work we've been doing with the department and with NHS England. But Colin's right, there is a lot to do, and I think one of the challenges of SEND is we are never going to make people happy all the time. It just isn't going to happen. And I think one of the things that I focus on is we are not setting up a system that's for what parents want. We're trying to do something that children need. Working with that as we develop it. But there is a lot in this report, and our health colleagues, it's a shame they're not here today because it is a really strong partnership and it matters as we've tried to untangle the challenges of the ICB. But I will add no more, but very happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Dame Christine. I'm now going to ask Councillor Sam Smith, Cabinet Member for Children and Families, if you have anything further you'd like to add.
Nothing further to add from what colleagues have said and what we discussed in the last report, but again, happy to take any questions.
Okay, and officers.
From each.
Thank you. So I'm going to remove the recommendations on page 63 and to seek a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. I'm now going to open to the floor for debate, and Councillor Callaghan, quick off the mark.
Right, thank you for the report and the progress on delivery. I've got 4 questions because I've read this back to front and inside out. And the first one, you're not going to be able to answer because the partner's not here.
Councillor Callaghan, did you just say 4 questions?
Well, no, not really. They're just into
if there are,
4
can we
bits,
just do them
4
two
bits,
at a time? Okay.
4 bits of it. So obviously the first one you can't answer because how is the board monitoring and scrutinising the progress of partners in delivering the SEND improvement programme to ensure that the required activity is taking place to deliver the required improvements? Well, it's not fair to ask that because the health partner said, you can answer it, I'll have it then.
So we'll take that first question first. Who's going to go with that?
When the council's inspection result came through, the council, by statute, had to set up an improvement board, and as part of that, had to appoint the independent chair and me. And when a local area fails, it always fails on governance. And so, one of the absolute key roles of the board, which we do every board, is to monitor and scrutinise performance across the partnership. That's why we've spent so much work in the last year on building that partnership and understanding it and accessing data. So there's no hiding. There's no hiding behind waiting lists. There's no hiding behind performance. And actually, the health contribution has been incredibly good. And where there are issues, we dig them. We don't allow them to come up. We don't allow them to go back. We go in and in. So a restructured speech and language service, for example, or still challenges in OT. So what we're doing about it, So in terms of my role, I take my role very seriously in terms of governance and scrutiny. And I'm happy we're holding people to account.
Thank you, Christine. Councillor Callaghan.
Right. So how is the board ensuring that the voices of children, young people, parent carers are heard and considered in the activities that are being carried out to address the areas of improvement required by the inspection? So what are they today?
Well, for a start, I sit on the board, so on the improvement board, and attend all of the time so that the conversation does involve a representative from parents and carers so that we hear what's going on. Obviously, in our role as the Parent Carer Forum, we go out around widely in the local area and hear what parents are saying to us and their experience, and then bring that back to the board and say, you know, what we're hearing that parents are, you know, what concerns them, where they feel there needs to be improvement. For instance, one thing that comes up very often is about communication. so that if parents know what is available and that they are told that very clearly, that makes a big improvement to their level of anxiety about support for their children or what is available for their children. I think that has improved a lot. There has been big work on, infographics to understand pathways and for that to be explained. Certainly, initially, parents didn't know where their child, that there was a late waiting list in terms of where they sat on that waiting list, and to get an understanding of how long that might be and having regular contact with that service to know, and that has improved as well. So, yes, I think there's been big improvements in trying to get communication and understanding of what parents and carers need.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Smith, you want to come in?
Thank you, Jim, and fantastic question, Councillor Callahan, because that's why we're here, to improve the experience of children and families, so it's important to hear from them. So in addition to having a parent and care forum rep on the board, as I mentioned in an answer to Councillor Henry, on the last agenda item, colleagues from Health and this county council have gone out and held district by district meetings to hear back from hundreds and hundreds of families and children, and that's happened in every district, both face to face and online. And we've also launched a Send Improvement mailbox, and families can write into that with any feedback whatsoever, and then they've given a response to that. But also on the board, we have representation from schools, and Morty Academy Trust is represented on there, and that's really important because schools are the front door, as I think a colleague behind me said earlier, are the front door to matters being raised by families, children, every day. They're there 5 days a week, so it's important to have that voice on the board as well.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Callahan.
Right. How confident is the evidence that we've got, the correlation of evidence that actually it's going to meet what it's supposed to meet? So for the inspection, how is that going to work out?
Well, we're in interesting times now, because obviously we were due a monitoring inspection visit, and we did a special session over the summer with key staff on, are we ready for inspection? Are we ready? Do we have the evidence? Are we all telling the same story? Do we have all the same details? So we did that over the summer, and we've also talked to the regional staff from the DFE and the NHS who attend our board as part of the process. And I was and am very confident that should there be a monitoring inspection or whatever variation of life we think they'll come up with, because we don't know at the moment, that actually Nottingham would pass that inspection and would meet the requirements of the priority action plan. I think that's quite different from actually what it's now trying to do, which is going beyond the priority action plan into something broader about the very best outcomes for children. One of the challenges we've got is that government has not defined sufficient progress. So we are having to define that ourselves. But on the national evidence that I work with, and I chair 2 other boards apart from Nottinghamshire, I believe we would be on good progress for that inspection. And so our work this term is about, by the end of term, getting to a point where we are confident about telling the Nottinghamshire story, and we are testing that evidence again. But it's clear, it's developed, and it's a good partnership.
Okay, Christine, thank you.
Can I just say, are you confident that we will be able to sustain and maintain that?
I think sustaining and maintaining it will all be hard work. And I think what we've tried to do in a number of areas is move from improvement to quality. So it's something about now building quality assurance into everything that we do. And I think now that we've untangled things, put them back together, that's where we are. That does not make it easy against the rising demand backlog, etc. But yeah, that's where it's got to get to.
Okay, Colin.
And I think the sustaining and improving is interesting. Look, I guess, Councillor Callahan, perhaps behind your question is, are we going to continue to invest the money in it? Yeah. You could throw as much money as you want at the education psychology service. There aren't enough education psychologists in the system for the growing demand. There isn't enough speech and language therapists in the system for the growing demand. I spent, as I say, Friday, with 2 primary schools. Yeah, the children that I saw that were pre-verbal, aged 4. Yeah, some who had vocabularies of less than 15 words. They didn't need speech and language therapy. Yeah, they need some of the work that you're very familiar with around early years development, speech development. Councillor Taylor and I spent Wednesday evening, or Tuesday evening last week, with 2 of our youth clubs at Dukeries and Valley. Yeah, and at the Dukeries one, which was an open access universal youth service, there was a significant number of young people there that had got additional need. Yeah, and one in particular who we had supported transition from year 6 to year 7. Yeah, who was doing brilliantly, well in her secondary school. Yeah, the second youth club that we went to see was one called Link, which is the phrase that we use when it's a send youth service. Yeah, my heart sang. Yeah, I have to say, when I saw those young people with significant disabilities and significant challenges smiling, dancing, being happy, engaging with each other. A young woman that was a little bit sad that a youth worker was spending some brilliant time with, and then her peers, were literally putting their arms around her, and supporting her. She'd only be coming to that youth club for 2 weeks. Yeah, so I'm confident that we will get there. One of the things I've become so obsessed with Ofsted about is what's your framework, is because the framework was published on January the 11th, and we got the call on January the 16th. Yeah. I don't want to have the new framework, or indeed the new monitoring framework, land on us 1 week, and then we're trying to respond to it the following week, because as our colleagues in education would tell us, part of the success of being able to be the best version of yourself during an Ofsted is understanding what the rules of engagement are. Yeah, and at the moment we don't quite understand the rules of engagement, and we were caught a bit. Yeah. What's improved, in my view, over the last 18 months, if I may, Councillor Trona, that's changed. SEND was not high enough a priority within the county council 2 years ago, and it was of no priority within our health colleagues. It is now one of the highest priority for both organisations, and indeed, the sum of the parts is greater than the total. Is that the phrase I'm looking for? Yeah, it feels to be even higher, given that it's a priority for both of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. James.
Thank you, Chairman. It's excellent to hear that, Colin, because I can assure you that in schools, it is now the single biggest challenge, I would say, in all the schools. I've got 36 schools, 6 local authorities. Every single one says that the level of need, the complexity of the need is getting more and more significant, and the appropriateness of the funding is getting worse. So there is going to be a challenge moving forwards. I really welcome all the work. I think it's brilliant. There are more and more young people getting the right level of support now. That's absolutely fantastic. My question is about the number of children who do have an EHCP that identify as a special setting, but for whom there is no place in a special school. Now, I know this anecdotally from the different local authorities. It's quite significant in the schools that we run. What's the level of this issue in Nottinghamshire, please?
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, James, for that question. I'll pass on to colleagues who will know the specific detail of that. But before I do, I just want to stress, because it's really important, and it's not the same in every authority, but if every child in Nottinghamshire that has an education, health and care plan that says that they would be better served in a different setting is still receiving education. And I stress that because it's really important. That is not the same in every authority, as you're probably aware, working across 6 of those. And the County Council is putting significant investment into the creation of SEND school places. We are investing over £50 million into the creation of over nearly 500 of those across the county. I can't build the schools quick enough at the speed that we are assessing these children and telling them that they'd be better served elsewhere. That's just a fact. You can't do that. But we are doing. I think we've delivered over 100 this recently. We've expanded places like St Giles in Retford. We're building a 160 place SEND school in Mansfield that I've visited with Councillor Taylor and colleagues twice, and it was in the local press recently. If you have a look, so be reassured that as a council we are doing absolutely everything possible and investing huge amounts of money, over £50 million, into addressing that. But I take your point that the need is going to continue to grow, and that need grows quicker than we can get shovels in the ground. But we are absolutely committed to doing that. We have a target of creating over 490 additional SEND school places by the end of 2026, I think it is, and we're on track to deliver that. I'll pass to colleagues, probably Peter, on the specific detail.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We'll have to. I mean, the number changes all the time as we go through that commissioning process. In terms of specialist provision, I think we know there's not enough supply to meet demand. We know that rising number of children with education, health and care plans, of which around 50% transpire into seeking specialist provision, puts strain not only on Nottinghamshire's SEND schools that we as a county council and our multi-academy trusts operate, but also on the independent market, which is not, ideally where we want our funding to be going. We want it to be invested as locally as possible to reduce travel for children and young people, to make sure needs are met within their local places. We can certainly check the number and send that round committee and give you a breakdown. I know it will be too high in many cases, and that we need to be working really well with our schools and education settings where those children remain. We also know, and I know from speaking to head teachers of our special schools, that there's children within specialist settings that could really easily be served within their mainstream schools and within inclusive mainstream schools that are tying up places in some of our special schools. So there is something around making sure that our schools are as equipped as they can be. Yes, complexity is increasing. Money isn't increasing at the rate we'd want it to, and if it was, we know we'd be putting it out to our schools and our education settings. That's where we want to invest to meet needs. But it's a balance, and we have to work through that balance. I've just been out, just before the summer, around all of the districts, meeting with SENCOs and head teachers. We met several hundred across each district. We were unpicking the challenges around provision in each of those areas. We're now working with those district leaders around passing information back and looking at some more localised solutions and problem solving. What are the challenges in one area versus another? Because they're subtly different, actually. And sometimes that it's trying to get the right provision locally. We do have enhanced provision units within schools. We've got satellite SEND provisions. We've got a new special school that Diverse Academies Trust will be operating. We've got a free school bid in for an additional specialist provision, and we've got another multi-academy trust seeking to increase significantly the size of their special school by another 140 places. We've also just recently provided expansion of places at St Giles special school, so we're continuing to move forward with that. If we could build if we had the money, which we don't, to have an endless capital program, I guarantee you those places would be filled. It's about reshaping ourselves as a system around more complex needs being met as close to home as we can, and that's a real challenge for the sector, and it's one that we all need to face together. And I will get that data sent round.
Yeah, it wasn't so much. I'm not that worried about the actual number. It's just getting an understanding as how significant an issue it is for this local authority. It seems far worse from my experience in others. There are other local authorities who grant more EHCPs than this one does, and therefore by definition there is going to be more and more pressure on the places. But of course we've got children at the heart of this, and a child who is on their EHCP, it's recommended they have special provision if they're not getting it, but they are in a mainstream school. That doesn't help them. It doesn't help the school either, and the amount of funding that comes to us when we have a child with an EHCP that recommends a specialist setting doesn't feel like it's the same amount as the investment they would get if they were in that special school. So it puts pressure on everyone, basically.
Yes, and just to acknowledge that that's something which we are seeking to work towards, and we're working with our schools forum as well. we've established a high needs working group, and one of the areas that we're working on together is understanding those children and young people who are in mainstream settings and how we can better support them to remain there in the absence of specialist placements, how that balances against our high needs spend. So we've got the support of our schools forum in that piece of work.
Thank you, Peter. James, anything else? Okay. If I can ask my Vice Chairman if you've got any question or any input you'd like to have. Okay, thank you. Martin, do we have anything to add to the recommendations?
I think it's just sort of mentioned that the information on the number of children within the HCP where a specialist placement would be beneficial, that we just circulate that to members once it's available.
Okay, thank you. So it has been moved, seconded. So if I can ask for a show of hands on the recommendations on page 63, please. Okay, thank you. That is unanimous. If we can now move to just before we move on to agenda item 7, are you staying with us for the rest of the meeting, Dame Christine? That's fantastic, and I just want to say thank you again so very much for coming today. The information you've given us has been both pragmatic and enlightening, as I said, and remarkably detailed, and it's given us a good perspective of how things are operating at a level perhaps beyond our periscope. So thank you very much. So if I can go on to agenda item 7, which is children and families, departmental performance, risks and financial position for Q1 of 2024/25. So this would be the period April, May, June, I presume. And I'd like to invite Councillor Tracy Taylor, Cabinet Member for Children and Families, and Councillor Sam Smith, to Cabinet Member for Education and Centre, to introduce the report. Who'd like to go first, please?
I'll start, Chairman, but it will be brief. I mean, the report is self-explanatory. The areas of biggest challenge financially for us remain around placements for children in our care. Although I have to say that I'm very proud of officers' efforts in keeping the spending as tight as they managed to, despite the challenges of the pressures and the cost of the placements. I suspect Councillor Smith will offer similar comments in respect of SEND.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. And Chairman, I think from an education and SEND perspective, obviously the report highlights the improvements we're making in education, health and care plan timescales, which we have covered in the previous 2 items. Page 72 highlights the fact of GCSE grades that have been obtained, and obviously that is because grade boundaries have been brought back in line with pre-pandemic levels, and also highlights that there's been a slight narrowing of the gap in the proportion of disadvantaged children who have achieved grades 9 to 5, and the reduction in the gap is a good thing, just to avoid confusion that happened a few months ago. I'm happy to take questions on anything.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Taylor, Councillor Smith. Do we have any officers present that wish to make any comment? No? Okay, so I am going to move the recommendations on page 78 and seek a seconder. Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman, and I'm now going to open it up to the floor, and Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, just a bit of an open one, Chairman. With the overspend on the budget, what are actually the immediate risks at the moment, and any long-term risks, and how we're actually addressing them? So it's a bit of an open question.
Okay, who'd like to take that question? Anyone?
Chair, if I may lead as Corporate Executive Director for Children's Services, always concerned about an overspend on the budget. I think, Jim, if my overspend at the end of the year is 0.58%, I'll be punching the air, in delight. The difficult, how a challenge around sufficiency of places, challenge of workforce, how that manifests itself is it's more expensive to help protect and safeguard and look after children. That's something that's been replicated kind of up and down the country. It's a national priority, And as Dame Christine has alluded to, we're expecting this side of Christmas for there to be a children's bill that will go out to consultation for 12 weeks. Yeah, that will begin to address some of those pressures within the market, both for SEND and for looked after children. Yeah, but we are challenged with recruiting local foster carers, or indeed nationally recruiting foster carers. What that means is that we're seeing children who would be in foster care, yet being in residential care. It's a bit like, the analogy for me would be seeing children who should be in mainstream school being in special schools, because there's a place in a special school but not a place in local school. So that's a real challenge for us, Jim. Yeah, I think our budget position will be under pressure this year and next year until there is some level of reform that does something about nationally controlling some of the market, which it is increasingly influenced by international market forces, including venture capital from other parts of the world.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Cream. I think from an education and SEND perspective, there is a forecast overspend of about £500,000, and I think just to say that when we were inspected by Ofsted and the CQC for our SEND partnership, obviously the speed of time we were responding to education, health and care plans has played a massive part in that. So I think it was quite right that the council invested all it could into increasing the capacity of writing those reports and issuing them to families. And paragraph 54 just highlights that is a forecast overspend if we continue to use those external providers that we've used over time, and I think that's going to be subject to a budgeting monitoring panel discussion later on this year. And as Peter highlighted in a previous report, we just signed off I call him the Chancellor because I always forget what his title. The Cabinet Member for Finance has just signed off over £1 million of funding to help address that as well. So just that. Peter, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Just to see that the pressures with regard to the finances for SEND are well known. We invested significantly last year. We need to make that sustainable. I think we've discussed that this morning. And as we go through the budget pressure process and reviewing our services and reviewing demand, we need to have a long-term view of making sure that our SEND services are sustainable. Because where we find ourselves currently is trying to manage that continued increased demand against continued inward investment. So that's the key challenge that we've got financially across our SEND services, and it is demand led, and we're seeing that playing out. I think the other budgetary challenges we've got within education, learning and inclusion relate to inflation on pensions, which is a pressure that we see in our monitoring report, which is certainly not something that's in the control of the division itself. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Thank you, Colin. And thank you, councillors.
Yeah, thanks for that. It was nice if we had more, but it's nice to know that the challenge has actually been noted and being addressed as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Creamer. Councillor Callaghan, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, it's good to note the authority is working with partners to support children and families at the right time and at the right level, and to provide help at the earliest opportunity based on needs rather than an application of threshold, because we know that don't work. As you have rightly pointed out, social work assessments don't always result in meaningful support for children and families, because I think they feel done to rather than done alongside. But my question was, and I think throughout this meeting, I think we have sort of answered some of it, but I've wrote it, so I'm asking it. The SEND area inspection was poor. We can't get away from that. And we have got teams now working to show improvement for children and families, both in the short term and long term. Is that right? And they will carry on doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can't you go back?
Yes.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, I think I was possibly hearing something slightly different. You went off into SEND at the end. It doesn't necessarily follow that right help, right time is about children with SEND needs. Yeah. So, you know, my head is in the early help, early intervention, in the children's social care.
Better graduated response, and actually, and I think the lady said, listening to what parents and children want rather than what we impose on them, because sometimes that doesn't work, and then we say, this family's not working with us or whatever. Well, actually, no, of course they're not, because you know you've put an intervention in that doesn't match their needs at that particular time. So I think that's what I've heard through the whole of this committee today, that actually we are listening. We have got a graduated response for when and what they need rather than what we think. And I think that's sometimes where it's bogged down our social workers, because they've had to do assessments, and actually if we'd have been earlier, we wouldn't have got to that, and that's why early intervention frustrates me.
Okay.
You sure you don't want to come over to the other side? Because you.
No, we'll not have that discussion. But what I will say is, Councillor Callahan, you are deeply involved in this area, I know, and your comments, positive comments, are warmly welcomed. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chairman, is there anything you'd like to question or input? No? Thank you very much. And so, Martin, do we have anything to add to the recommendations? No. So we have recommendations on page 78. And so I'm going to ask for a show of hands on those, please. And once again, unanimous. So thank you very much. And we are going to move on to agenda item number 8. And this is for me to introduce the report on the outcomes of the review of secondary school pupil place planning. And you'll forgive me, it's my first time I've had to do this. So what I will say, and I just want to precede my comments on the report with, I was made chairman of this committee, I think last December, and during this year, I've got to say, I've been pretty humbled by what I've seen, both in terms of commitment and desire to make things better for children from both members and particularly officers and those sat to my left. I think as a committee, I think we are working pretty well. I think, yeah, I'd take outstanding. But one of the things we have done that you may or may not be aware of is that before these committee meetings take place, there are obviously some pre-agenda meetings and chairman and vice chairman meetings, and I've asked Councillor Callahan to those meetings so that we get full representation across party. I think that we did some good work, particularly in the work programme discussions, where we got clear consensus and everybody made sure that their views were heard. And I'd just like to say thank you to Councillor Purduhor and Councillor Callahan, as well as all members, for engaging in a constructive way, positive way, and a determination for us to operate in the scrutiny committee apolitically and, as I say, constructively. That doesn't mean that we don't challenge. Challenge needs to be there if we think it's appropriate. Anyway, moving on to the report, I'd like to thank all those officers and members who attended the review group meetings. We looked at a number of factors, including pupil projected numbers, i.e. demand, pupil projections for supply of places within the schools. One challenge that we do have is that there is only one secondary school in Nottinghamshire that's not an academy. So that adds in some particular dynamics for us that we don't perhaps see quite the same in primary schools. We looked at options for addressing any insufficiency, as well as admission criteria. We looked at expansions where applicable for schools, and I know that we discussed some of that with regard to SEND just now. Construction of new schools, and we've seen some new schools announced and also built quite recently as well. So there's new schools, there's the implications of utilisation and acquisition of land, the challenges that we have in acquiring land of sufficient scale, and that is all too often at the I think developers would prefer to put houses on it, so that doesn't always help, but I suppose that's a challenge for all council. And then once we identify where we can expand or build or acquire land, then it's how we manage those capital projects, how we work with the boroughs and districts, and also things like Section 106 or SIL contributions and how they're used. And I think that there's some questions there around, can some of those elements be moved to where it's more useful for the community generally, and certainly around school placements, that might be something to look at. There are 6 recommendations. They're on page 95, and I particularly like to acknowledge and offer my thanks to Peter McConaughey and Wayne Bexton and the service officers for all their support in this review of secondary school pupil place planning. So I'm going to ask officers present if they've got anything further that they would like to add. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to thank everybody from the working party for their input. I think place planning is something which we've long been responsible for, but certainly over the last 18 months there's been significant improvements around how we work collectively across departments through our strategic school place planning board, the way we scrutinise data, the decision-making process to make sure that there's the right siting across members at the right time, and other stakeholders, and the mapping and tracking of the process. So it felt like a really timely review, task and finish review, to test some of those processes that have been improved upon. So just from an officer perspective, we really welcome that level of scrutiny and the kind of intense nature that those working parties lend themselves to really getting into the detail. So thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Colin.
And very briefly, Chair, I want to thank my colleagues from the world of multi-academy trusts, in particular in the work that we do. We're not, I've seen other local areas where there's a level of conflict, a level of, divisiveness, a level of playing, whatever. That's not what I experienced. Nigel and I and Peter have worked really hard, specifically around something like content leading, where we've got a complex wicked issue, but we're trying to work that through. And I first met James 9 years ago, James, this week, at the Rushcliffe Heads, where it was a really difficult meeting where I was saying to the Rushcliffe Heads, you don't trust us and we don't trust you. And we have moved in that journey over the last 9 years to one of a much more mutual respect, planning together, putting stuff on the table and having some of those hard conversations. So I'm grateful to colleagues from Multi-Academy Trust and the World of Education as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin. So I would like to move the recommendations on page 96, and I seek a seconder. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. So I'm now going to open the floor for debate, and Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. It's a very interesting report. Well done on the work. I'm having this issue in my area. Half of my division is brand new. It's newly built, and the difficulties that I'm finding, I'm sure you found when you were looking at this, is you can't guarantee how old the children are going to be when they move into the area. Now, half of my division is brand new houses. It's Fernwood and Middlecote. It's brand new. So you can aim off for primary school places. You can't really aim off for secondary school places. By the time you have an influx of older children and you've built those places, then the children would have aged out. And I think that's one of the big concerns that we've got. You can't demand that only small children move into the housing estates, or how many older children. And that's what I'm finding difficult, is how do we plan when we don't know what the plan's going to be? And I think that's the difficulty. Like, you can plan for primary schools, but secondary school places, as in this report, it's very, very difficult. I wish the council all the best in looking at this, and I'm more than happy to work with Sam, as I have been doing, and with yourself, Chairman. But I don't know how this is resolved, if I'm honest.
Okay. Anybody want to come back to that? Councillor Taylor.
Sorry, I was just going to go back to kind of plain English and sort of first principles. When housing developments are planned, there is a matrix, a national matrix, for the number of children of any age that may be living in those houses. So there is a matrix which applies to the primary requirement and a matrix which applies to the secondary requirement. And whilst I accept that secondary children are not going to age backwards and feed into the primary sector, but primary age children will age and feed into the secondary, that matrix is the basis of the way that officers do the calculations. So it's featured in there already, Councillor Lee.
Chairman, I'm going to come back, and I agree with you. The problem is I agree with you. The problem is when these houses were built and allocation was done 20 years ago, the housing prices have significantly gone up. We know that older families will buy the houses now that we presumed would be for new families because they can't afford them. That means predominantly it's older families moving into new communities. We know that for a fact. Middlebeck and Fernwood is predominantly older families that are moving into the properties. We know that the primary school places are not being taken up. We know that. We already know that from the information that we've received. So the primary school places that we expected to be filled up are not being filled up. However, we know that older children are being moved in more than we expected. We know that for a fact because the secondary school places that are in Southern School are already being filled. Now, what I am saying is I get the difficulties. I don't know how that is resolved. And the point I'm saying is we can't guarantee from the information that we get is that we're going to get the amount of young children. With young children places, it's easier to plan for. It's harder to plan for than the older children. That's the point I am making, is we are guessing to a certain extent, and we always will guess, because we don't know. We don't know who's going to move into the area.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lee. I know from my own experience talking with Councillor Taylor, I will come to you, Peter, with issues within my own division when we were talking about primary school placements and primary school demand, that there is a formula that is used. As you say, there's a formula, and I think that was something like 26, there's an assumption of 26 or 28 primary school age children per 100 properties. I don't know what the number was for secondary because we didn't discuss that, and I know that in our division there's plenty of room for secondary. And I think that whilst there are always going to be variables, all we can do is go on nationally advised statistics and data, and no doubt over time that will be amended and improved upon. But I'll come to you, Peter, please.
Thank you. Just to use the phrase, pupil projections are an art, not a science, and I think it just speaks to that complexity that Councillor Lee is referring to. There's so many factors that make up projections. Housing developments are part of that, alongside GP registration, a whole host of other things detailed in the paper. I think we do need to acknowledge this is a review of secondary place planning, and there's a absolute challenge around the length of when things are factored in from developments and those housing yields that are DFE approved, kind of time progressing, and we have that level of flexibility sometimes where our colleagues in the police department have applied for deeds of variation to move funding that was positioned for a primary school towards a secondary school provision where that's where the need is, and I think that's something where we need to put some trust in the officers, the work that they're doing around those projections and mapping and tracking it, and when those hard decisions need to be made around reallocating funding, because that's where the actual need is going to be and time has moved on, that we get some support around those issues, because we are trying to respond to an ever complex and changing population.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and thank you, Councillor Lee. It's a good point. It's an area where obviously we have to take guidance from national bodies, but yeah, there are variabilities, and we see how housing development is going in the county and around the country, and it's quite a dynamic issue, but it's a point very well made. Thank you, Councillor Callum. Do you have anything you'd like to add? No. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Vice Chair, Councillor Clergy Hall. No? And not from me. Do we have anything to add, Martin?
All the work of the reviews and the report, so that's just about there.
Okay, so once again, thank you to everybody involved. But I'm now going to take a show of hands on the recommendations on page 96. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. So we will move on to work programme, agenda item number 9. So we have a work programme in the agenda. Who's introducing this? Is this me?
I'll do it. So obviously, what the new work programme, as the chair mentioned, we had like a slightly different way of developing this year that I think went down quite well. Just one thing to note: James sent out an email end of last week just about the task and finish review about fostering recruitment and retention. And obviously, as Colin was saying earlier, that is like a really big area of concern. So that would be a really useful piece of work, hopefully, for you to get stuck into. So James has sent out the invitation, the dates. Let James know if you'd like to attend, or we'll send out the invitation to you. As always, if you can't attend, you can nominate someone from your group to take your place. And then just one minor change that I didn't change on the work programme before it was published, but it has been changed now, that the outcomes of that review will then come to the March meeting, not the December meeting, as is detailed in the work programme.
Okay, so is there any questions on work programme? Councillor Callahan.
Well, it's a question for me, really. I'd like to be invited to go and visit some family hubs before March 25. Yeah, and I think we spoke, Rachel, haven't we? Oh, yeah. So just that, really.
Yeah, and we discussed that at the work programme meeting. And so, what myself, Councillor Perdue-Hall, and you, Councillor Callahan, need to do is agree some dates where we can, and some that we want to go and visit. Same with some of the care facilities, no problem. And then we'll pencil those dates in and look to move forward on that. Okay.
I can shout that, Martin. Don't you worry. Yeah, I would like to thank you, Martin, seriously, because you have been a great help to myself.
Okay. So,
thank you very much.
Do we have anything else to add, Martin, to this topic?
No, that's fine. It's just a note, so we don't have to vote on it.
Okay, thank you. So I am going to close this meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance. Dame Christine, once again, thank you ever so much for coming along, and to all members of the Scrutiny Committee and officers, thank you ever so much for the work that you do in trying to help improve things for children and families in Nottinghamshire. It's warmly appreciated. Thank you.